Hey, welcome back to the channel, everyone. So today we just got a new post on some upcoming changes and improvements. Looks like we've got some buffs in here, we've got some nerfs in here, we've got some changes that we want to discuss to see if it is good enough or if they need to go even further. So let's jump right into it. It starts off, Path of Exile 2 has been live for just a week. We've addressed some feedback already, and we're working on some more fixes on the key pain points in an upcoming patch. The full patch notes are coming soon, but check out some of the more significant changes below. And don't forget to make sure that you subscribe to the channel, because once we get those patch notes out, I will break them down and give you my opinion on everything that they're going to do. So we'll start off with gameplay features. Like we mentioned last week, we'll be adding capacity to fast travel between checkpoints within an area, as well as adding some more checkpoints to the area generally at all entrances and exits to the area, meaning if you find these first, you'll be able to instantly travel to them and continue exploring. And this, they let us know about last week that they were going to be adding that. So that's really nice, because I just finished taking my second character through to Endgame, and I will tell you that it is such a pain in those bigger areas where you go in and you miss something and then you got to backtrack the entire time. And I kept thinking like, oh, I wish I could just click on this and it would take me right there. So I am really looking forward to this. The next thing they said, they'll also be making passive point respecking cheaper, especially at higher levels. It had relatively aggressive curve, getting more expensive with character level. They flattened out that curve so it doesn't exponentially grow as much. This should generally result in around 40 to 50% less gold cost for respecking between the start and middle of endgame progression. Now, personally, this has been a huge hot topic, considering that we've been getting a lot of changes with classes. A lot of classes are being nerfed. It's also the beginning of the game. People just want to try things out. And I still feel, even with this, we're going to have a lot of issues, because I've had to respec many times for whatever reasons. And it's like you respec, then you're broke, and then you got to either have someone help you, or you have to, work to get a little bit of money basically to respec again. And I've actually found that in the later game, like once I get into Act 5, Act 6, it's easier for me to respec even with the more expensive cost, because I tend to have like over 100,000. So, respecking. Whereas in the early game, if I needed to respec, like it would break me, especially like Act 2, Act 3. So I'd like to see how this looks. If they said it's mostly, going to be towards the higher levels when it gets expensive that they're going to drop the most, then that could still be an issue in the beginning. Honestly, I don't know why they don't just make it free or very cheap, at least for the first month or two. They can always raise the price back up later on, but right now, while we're beta testing, let us try things, let them make the changes they need to make, and then let us be able to pivot from that without wrecking our entire money that we've saved up. Next up, we have Trial of the Sekimas. So players are finding the Trial of the Sekimas particularly frustrating in close range, so they've reworked how honor damage scales when in close range, as well as fixing an important bug that was causing players to take far too much honor damage and damage over time. So the honor damage is now going to scale down based on the distance to the enemies. So when you're in close range, you'll take 35% less honor damage, and then that's going to taper off as you get further away from the monsters to basically, what it is now. They also fixed the bug where damage over time was dealing thrice, I love that they use that word, thrice as much damage to honor as intended. And they fixed the bug where honor resistance was only applying to 2/3 of that damage. And then they said this was confusing for us too. I did see on Reddit there was a video of a person who walked through fire, and I think he had well over 1,000 honor left, and the damage tick just boom killed him right away, took away all his honor. So I'm glad that this is fixed, because one accidental thing basically ruined your run. Now, I don't think that these changes are gonna be enough honestly, when you get into doing it your third and your fourth time to get those last, 6 and 8 passive points. So I still think the Trial of Sekimas and, the Ultimatum one, they need to be changed. They need to, I'm not sure if it has to be something where it's like made easier or something, because difficulty really isn't like a huge deal, but they just don't seem worth it, especially because I don't really find a lot of the nodes to be something that's like game changing. So maybe they need to update the nodes, maybe they need to change it. I don't think I've ever heard any positive feedback as far as Ascension goes, whether people like it or not. I think most people overwhelmingly do not like this system. But moving on, Skitter Golems no longer use basic attacks and instead now just explode. The Serpent Clan's burrow and ambush attack now has been improved, visually telegraphing and cannot be used from as far away. Volcanoes created by Rattlecage's Fissure Slams now last for half the duration. So then now we get into Endgame and monster balance. So spoiler alert, they are nerfing the Endgame to make it a little bit easier, so that's good. We'll go on. It says, generally the balance in Endgame maps was more punishing than intended, so we've toned down the damage in a number of ways and disabled a certain on-death effect where the telegraphing was not as clear as it should have been. So maps no longer have additional elemental resistance penalties inherently applied at tier 6 and tier 11 on higher maps. It's now going to be constant across all of the endgame. The chaos damage now also scales less aggressively over the endgame. Critical strikes from monsters now deal 40% less bonus damage. This is really big because you could get one shot like without notice. Lowered the baseline monster density of breach encounters, primarily by reducing the frequency of the elite monsters appearing. Disabled the volatile crystal modifier. We'll revisit this in the future pending telegraphing improvements. The purple explosives created by the volatile plants modifier or on rare monsters now deal significantly less damage. The siphon flash charge modifiers on monsters now drains 10 times less flash charges per second. This was unintentionally draining way too many charges. These changes should generally result in an endgame that is much more survivable than before, and we will continue to address problematic cases as they arrive. So I think this is great news, and it's good that they gave us that, because the next stuff is going to be a lot of nerfs. So let's jump into that. So they said we've made charge modifiers. Whoop. Doesn't look like these are nerfs yet, but we've made charm modifiers on belts substantially more common and now appear at a much lower level. The of symbolism modifier now appears from level 23 onwards, and the of inscription modifier now appears from level 64 onwards. So that's good, because I've heard a lot of complaints about that. Electrocute is now 25% harder to build up, but the damage penalty has been removed from the support gem. So that seems to be a nerf. Next is added a new lightning damage and electrocute cluster to the passive tree in between the ranger and monk sections. So we'll yet to see what that is. That could be, a positive for us. It is now more difficult to chain freeze enemies by reducing the amount of freeze buildup applied after a freeze has been applied. And I feel like a lot of these here are probably going after the builds that people are putting together with like the on shock or on freeze different meta gems. The Hunter's Talisman's notable now grants +1 charm slot. The small passive skills leading up to it now grant the stat it formerly gave. The charm helper text has been updated to indicate that you cannot have more than 3 charm slots unlocked, so that we can add more sources of it in the future. The next thing is skill and support gem balance. So since the launch, we've unfortunately had to nerf a few skills that were far too overpowered. How do we define overpowered? Basically, it's a situation in which a certain skill is so powerful that players feel no other method of playing the game is viable. Now, I'm not sure if I agree with this statement of what it should be, because a lot of times what will happen is players are going to basically go to the meta, and something can only be slightly better. It'll end up being the meta, and everybody's going to really feel like, oh, I got to play this because, that's the best version of the class. So I hope they're really looking into that, and they're not really judging it by just like, oh, everybody's going ice because it's the best. Like, instead of nerfing ice, why don't we look at the damage compared to other classes and then say, okay, well, maybe fire can be brought up, maybe lightning can be brought up. I'd rather them look at things like that rather than just, nerfing the heck out of a class just because it's fun and you're able to really kill stuff. But that's just my take. So generally speaking, we're trying to do this in a way that doesn't make a build bad, but we can make mistakes. Ideally, any truly meta shifting changes will only happen at the same time as a content patch with the new league to play in. So this is true for those that are new to Path of Exiles. Usually when they come out with a league, whatever you decide to invest your time in, even if it's overpowered, unless it's game breaking, like actually game breaking, they generally will just let it play out for the league. So a lot of times what I do, because I enjoy playing, builds when they're at their, the strongest, is I will jump onto that. So, people call me meta slave, but it's whatever. I like to have fun. I like to kill a lot of things. I mean, it's just how it is. So letting them nerf things now should not put a sour taste in your mouth, because moving forward, when we actually get into the real game and not the beta, we're not going to be seeing these things. So I hope like this doesn't give you a negative, idea of how GGG does things. They do like to keep things balanced, but once the game actually starts rolling, you shouldn't expect to get nerfed like in the beginning of a season or anything like that. So moving on, but that doesn't mean we haven't been looking at underpowered skills and support gems. We've got a number of changes planned which should improve some of these skills. The full list of changes will be in the patch notes, but here's an example, or here's a sample of what you can expect. So they have improvements to rolling slam and all the shield skills. In the mace section, improvements to various bow skills, especially the skills used to generate frenzy charges, improvements to bone spells and chaos damage over time spells in the occult section, improvements to various crossbow skills, especially those in the higher tiers, improvements to some of the underachieving quarterstaff abilities. So these are all good things, and these are things that even if the build, like say this isn't like major changes, it could be enough to really fill out your build to make it feel a lot better than it currently feels. So I love that they're looking at underpowered skills right now and not just axing all the top powered skills and trying to steal our fun. So moving on, alongside all of these skill gem improvements, we've also done a pass over the support gems. We've added 2 new supports and removed or lessened the penalties on many others, notably the fire, lightning, and cold exposure supports. They added the tremor support gems, which can be used to give up to multiple more aftershocks to skills with a damage penalty. They added a bidding support gem, which can be used to give more damage to command skills of supported minions. The fire exposure, lightning exposure, and cold exposure support gems no longer penalize damage of supported skills. They now have a mana cost multiplier of 120%. So we'll see how that works out. I'm already struggling with mana. I've struggled on my Ranger. I've struggled on my Sork. I'd imagine other people are probably struggling. So we'll see like how that affects. There is also some notable nerfs to a few of the remaining overachieving skills. So here it comes, guys. Ready? Skeletal Arsonist Spirits now match the other 2 skeleton mages. This should result in a slight decrease in the number of arsonists at a higher level. Now, I talked to my buddy who's running this build. He said what this looks like is probably a 30% less arsonists that he can summon. So that does seem like a pretty sizable nerf. Next, a nerf to the damage over time component of very high levels of tornado and vine arrow. So I don't know if you saw some of the videos on the vine arrow. It was insane. I was about to run that build to try it. I am glad I waited a day because it does not look like it's going to be as insane. They go on to say these were never intended to be dealing damage themselves, but more so to act as a way for other skills to propagate damage. So what they were doing, I believe, is they were just boosting the skill gem up, and it like had no cap of how much damage it could do based on the how high the level was. So the more you can get that level up, the more damage you can do, and it was just insane. Next, magnetic salvo can now only use your stuck lightning arrows as opposed to those created by your party members. So I just did an entire run through with another lightning arrow ranger, and we were tearing it up with this magnetic salvo. I did not know that this was unintended, but I can tell you that it was pretty nice. We had no problem clearing everything and being like 2 fast players. Like, I was having a blast. Now I don't know if I'm going to be able to go back to any builds where you're slower because they're just such a fun class. I really do think they need to add some more speed in the game. I don't care how they do it. Also some way to like maybe teleport, or like we had charge. There were so many things in POE 1, and I know this isn't POE 1, but I think you can still make the game faster. Like with the ranger, I still felt like I was much faster than the other classes, and I also felt like all the fights still had meaning, because you really can't go too fast because they just load you up, and you know, you can get blocked in and stuff like that. So there were times where if like I rushed ahead, I could, you know, have too many things on me, which would force me to slow down. So I think there is a nice way to do that. Also, I'd love, you know, like if we had out of combat speed, so that when we are running back, you know, maybe the teleporters will be enough. But anyway, I just think that we need to add more speed to the game. I hope they are listening to that. So it says, as we wind down for the holiday season, we wanted to thank you all for our most successful launch so far. We could not have done it without all of your support. A lot of the team will begin to take some much needed rest over the next few weeks, but we look forward to getting back in the new year refreshed and ready for an exciting year of development in 2025. Happy holidays, Exiles. So there we have it. We should get patch notes soon. This patch will likely come this week, I would imagine. So we'll be able to see it. Don't forget, again, subscribe if you want to see me break down and give you my thoughts on everything from the patch. Also, keep you updated on everything Path of Exile 2. Let me know down below. Do you think these were good changes? Do you think this is going to be enough for the trials to make you happy as a melee user? Do you think the specking cost is going to be sufficient enough at only 40 to 50% less gold, or do you think they need to go much harder? And then, just for the heck of it, let me know what you think about the speed of the game. If you're playing, you know, the ranger or other classes, like, do you think the game's too slow? Do we need to add some new stuff? Anyway, let me know in the comments. I read all of the comments. I answer all of the comments. I love talking to the community. So thanks again for watching the video, and as always, I'll see you guys in the next one.